Hello and welcome to this self-help segment. I'm your host, Keith Weisheit, licensed clinical social worker. And rarely in my life do I get a chance to sit down with someone who has trained me and taught me most of how to be a social worker, but certainly trained me in how to be a much better social worker than if she were not. I welcome into the program Karen Schilling. She's a licensed clinical social worker with South Central Louisiana Human Services Authority. Karen, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you, Keith. You know what? We've known each other so long in so many different capacities. I forget that you were a student, that you were an intern with us.
Yeah, intern many years ago. In fact, I having to clean out my office at my house. I have a plaque from Vanderbilt about some of the work that we did in a crisis of theirs, and it got some damage to it. And I am going to spend whatever money I need to get that refurbished.
Yeah.
Because it's a really big deal. And so it's interesting, in all of the paths that we've walked, we've got this history of trying to help people deal with some of these grief reactions. And we've had a lot of grief reaction to deal with over these last few months, weeks, years, and now here recently, this last month.
Absolutely. And, you know, we look, because we've just undergone the impact of Ida, and we're so absorbed in that, and we've had a break from all the corona news that we've had. But that plays such a huge part in what's going on with us now, and the sadness, the grief reactions, the things that we're feeling now, and that stifling feeling that we have of being immersed in, you know, in the issues and the problems that we have right now. It's not just been a month, it's been, you said, a long time.
Right, and those things tend to be compounded if we don't kind of recognize the issues there, or recognize that there may be some ongoing triggers. And it's kind of interesting. You and I both had the fortune and ability to listen to Elizabeth Kubler-Ross speak. Mm-hmm. And she's one of those people that kind of taught us about the grief reaction and the stages of grief. And I know that there are some theories that have changed a little bit. They've added some things to that, but one of the things that recently I've been able to learn a little bit about is that instead of looking at the stages of grief linear, as in, you know, and those, just to recap for people, they are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Instead of looking at that linear, there's some new research about talking about that as a spiral staircase. And that I think that very often when we look at something as overwhelming as Ida and how widespread the impact is of how it's uprooted, not just an analogy for trees, but uprooted our lives, it comes in addition to how our lives had already changed, and we kind of go up and down that spiral staircase, and we feel that sadness kind of coming in waves.
And I think that's a much more accurate way to view grief. It is absolutely not linear. It's not circular, but that's exactly what you said, a spiral effect, because, you know, at different times as we experience different things that may or may not be related to, or may be related to the object or the thing that's caused us so much grief. I mean, we talked about earlier triggers, and these things are just compounding us, you know, to experience whatever, you know, the grief reaction that we have. And there's no timeline for grief. And, you know, and it's very real at the moment, even if it's 10 years later. It may not be as severe, but we have a way of coping with it. We have a way of spiraling with it, and it's real, and it still hurts sometimes, even if it's 10 years later. But what we do, which we'll talk about later, to help when we recognize those things that, you know, are facets of our grief, you know, we're able to implement those things a little bit easier as time goes by. But the hurt of grief, I mean, you know, it doesn't ever get better over. It's just that we figure out how to deal with it a little bit better and recognize it, and be able to maybe curb that spiral or help keep that spiral from getting out of control.
Yeah, and so it's a really good point, because we never really know what those triggers are. In the not knowing when the storm hit, and we'll just talk about how our grief reaction is, I'll share with you mine. My most difficult moment was when I was at lunch with my little sister. And it was ironic that, it's not ironic anymore, because my birthday tends to always fall hurricanes.
Yeah.
So twice now there's been a hurricane on the eve of or on my birthday, Katrina and now Ida. And so the next day, I was out of town, displaced with my wife, who was temporarily disabled, and trying to take care of everything that she needed. Just being a caregiver, something that we're going to talk about as we talk about the impact of how this reacts with people and how they sometimes deal with that better or don't deal with that better, depending upon what kind of level of support or care that they have. I had been taking care of my wife and taking care of everything that needed, and I just kind of needed a break. And I went and had lunch with my little sister, and I was completely overwhelmed with emotion just sitting at lunch with my little sister. Mm-hmm. That's the most emotional I've been through the storm. And I would have never thought that would be that way for me, but just being with someone whom I knew cared and loved for me and in a way that's very special as a family member, it just that was a bit of a trigger for me.
Mm-hmm. You know, I had another trigger. I saw an owl in the tree one night. We were laughing because we were all standing out under the tree imitating the owl. And all of a sudden there was an epiphany for me from that owl. And it was it was a nice break from, just the troubles that we were going through. And I thought about wisdom and epiphanies. And so I was able to kind of get out of that. So it triggered me into a problem-solving release. So, be on the lookout for signs.
I don't know that people always understand that, especially people that look at the grief reaction as they try to do it a little too linear. They think that it's going to go from one phase. I was in denial. I realized that I'm shocked, and now I'm not in denial anymore, and now I'm just mad. And I think people sometimes think that those are just stepping stones, and they're not. And sadness has a way of existing throughout the process. And it's okay to be sad.
Yeah, sadness is completely, is a part of, and it's okay to be sad. And sad is a normal reaction to any type of loss that we have. But when sadness becomes out of control and it stops us from being able to do some of the things that we have to do to be able to meet the demands of our life, whatever, then that's when maybe, we need to start looking at maybe this is not just sadness, maybe it's something else. Maybe it goes beyond grief. Sadness, I'm sad that I lost an earring, is totally different from sadness of the loss of a person, a job, a house, possessions, things of that nature, relationships. And so I guess the more that we're invested in relationships, things, people, the more intense, that our sadness becomes, it's a true grief reaction, and then it can lead to other things that may be more ongoing and may be more problematic for a person.
And so a lot of times we as clinicians, we kind of get approached with severity. And so in our next segment, we'll talk a little bit more about severity and what people can do about that. But I think it's just important for people to realize that it's truly not only just okay, but it's very healthy to be sad. It's very healthy to see how your sadness impacts you.
In one of my jobs with South Central Louisiana Human Services Authority, I serve as an assist trainer, a suicide intervention skills training class to help lay people recognize where sadness and grief may go with individuals to suicide. And one of the things that we constantly let everyone know that it's okay not to be okay, and to be able to say something about it, to say that I'm not okay and it's not okay and I need to see somebody, I need to talk to somebody, I need to get support in some kind of way. And because that's unfortunately one of the things that can be one of the most detrimental effects for someone with an unresolved, debilitating grief, is that someone can think that the only way to solve that, and we try to stress to people that it's okay not to feel. None of us feel good. None of us feel great every single day. And it's important for us to be able to be in touch with that and acknowledge that that's part of life, but that we have to empower ourselves to do something about it.
And so emotional pain is a part of being alive.
Just like with regular pain, physical pain, it signifies to some to us that something's not right. Emotional pain is a very real and important thing for us to feel and to say that something's not right with us emotionally, spiritually, and that we do need to get something. We need to do something about that.
You know, it's very similar to some of the stories that I think we've been told and heard about people who are trying to get through and they're trying to do some recovery, but they're not really able to do it for whatever reason, but they don't really want to ask for help. And that's one of those things that we really want to stress to people today, is that if you're having a stress reaction, very often that stress can move us into some grief and or some complicated grief.
Absolutely. And I would say that that's probably what the majority of people in our communities are dealing with right now, is a very complicated grief. With the pandemic that had been going on and still is going on,
Right.
For the last 18 months, almost 2 years, you really lose track. It just seems like it's always been here. But, that alone has impacted our lives so much, our way of life, the fairs and festivals, the outdoor things that we did, the wearing masks, the needing to protect others, just the whole, everything that we've raised our awareness to, it's limited us in some ways. And then here we have now the physical losses of a hurricane, and the damage, the losses that we see everywhere we turn around, whether it's debris on the ground or dealing with an adjuster with our insurance or dealing with FEMA when we don't have insurance, on top of everything else that's going on in our lives as a result of dealing with a pandemic. This is probably what would be the most, is a very complicated grief. At one time in my life, I had two significant events happen in my life, and it wasn't until I had kind of moved through the second significant event that I realized, that grief that I experienced was so complicated. Couldn't quite put my finger on why wasn't I able to do some of the things and bounce back through that. And then I finally realized, well, yeah, it's because you had two huge experiences in your life and then lots of other things. So I think one thing that people just recognize, that it's okay to feel crushed, because it's been a very crushing few years for us. But there's hope. And I think we see that a lot in our community, with people bonding together, doing things to help one another, being happy when the garbage man passes at 10 o'clock at night, when normally we would fuss that they woke us up from and people running out of their houses at 10 to go give the garbage man a treat,
Right.
or some water, or
or
do something, or just wave and say, hey, I'm happy that at 10 o'clock your night you're doing that.
Karen, I think as we were talking about this sadness, you made a really good point about how grief is very similar to what Ida was.
Yeah, it's it's a storm within us, and we're struggling to get control over things that are just so overwhelming to us. An emotional storm, oftentimes when we're dealing with grief, and we're in a recovery from a storm. And when we attempt to start moving past grief, it's a recovery process that we need to go through.
And we can recover. That's the good news, is that there's hope for recovery. And sometimes we need help with that. And so I think sometimes people don't always realize when they need help. But the first thing that everybody needs to realize is that emotional pain is no different from physical pain. And we still have that stigma about people needing help with what we consider mental illness, but it is an illness like anything else.
Absolutely, and so many times. And I think we're making some strides with that.
Yeah.
But there are oftentimes people feel so isolated that nobody feels the pain, because they feel like they're reacting to something that's so individual and so specific to them, or that I shouldn't feel this upset about the loss of that. Somebody's going to think that I'm stupid, or I'm over. It's just overwhelming, or I'm over exaggerating the impact that this is on my life, but it's real.
Right.
And many times people suffer without it. The stigma is so overpowering that if I admit that I'm weak, that I'm not strong, that people will, they won't understand that. But that's a human feeling, and it's natural, and all of us have it. We're all going through that, no matter if it's a physical storm like a hurricane or any other type of loss or grief experience that we have.
And quite frankly, we all deal with that. We just need to make sure that we're able to do something about it. And so I think it's really important when we kind of help people understand or identify when sadness becomes depression. Mm-hmm. And depression, by definition, is that you're feeling overwhelmed where you can't do your activities of daily living. And there's several factors that talk about that. And it's having these very strong feelings. Sometimes it's anhedonia is one of those words. It seems really big, but it simply means we don't enjoy doing things that we used to enjoy. And anhedonia is one of those symptoms of depression that we need to be aware of. Some of the others about not eating or not sleeping.
Yeah, eating the wrong things, not eating well, not eating at all, eating too much. Sleeping is the same type of thing. Sleeping all the time, not sleeping well, having difficulty falling asleep, staying asleep, waking up early, just a disturbance in someone's usual pattern of sleep. And, and I think that lack of sleep can actually lead to other things, psychosis, where you are now not able to clearly distinguish between what is real and what's not. The exhaustion that your mind goes through, the exhaustion that your body goes through. Not being able to make decisions, just struggling to and certainly now, with people experiencing the hurricane, which adjuster did I go with? Being angry, anger is part of depression and grief, and appropriate expression of it is good, but some of the other ways that we might want to do that or not. So those are all general things, but when those feelings start to impact your life for more than, become a real problem for more than 2 weeks or a month or whatever, and they just keep going on, it's time to seek consultation. Our agency does have that, the call line, and we could put that up on the screen, or you can announce the number for that.
Yeah, it's the call line, and it's available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's 1-877-500-9997. So I'm going to say that one more time. That number is 1-877-500-9997. And that's just a wonderful way for people to be able to do something confidential. They can call in and they will talk to them. If there's a problem, you can talk with someone about that, and they will connect you with getting help, because there's hope.
There is. And we have a number of people on our staff who are peer support specialists, who are just regular, wonderful people who have experienced depression, drug addiction, problems in their everyday lives, that have worked hard to be able to get to a point, and they've become certified peer support specialists. And they can answer, the call line will plug them in to those individuals, and they can just kind of help sort, if they just want to talk to somebody, they can just sort through. And that peer specialist might say, you need to talk with somebody else. I would suggest to people not to wait long.
Yep.
It's assessments to go, talk to somebody, make that call, but also check with their insurance provider. Sometimes people's insurance have people that are in network. I know that our agency is in network with a lot of the providers, a lot of the insurance companies, with Medicare and with Medicaid and all the Bayou health care providers. But don't hesitate to call and seek out help. It doesn't mean that you're going to be attached to somebody or be put on medicine for the rest of your life, but the clinicians and providers will help assess what you need to help you get through and maybe learn some things to be able to get through to the other side. And
it's wonderful. One of the things that I learned over the years is that today is the best day to go through what you've been going through. And you can do that, and there's a way to do that. I want to give that number out one more time in case you have a question or an option that you need it. 1-877-500-9997. Karen, thank you very much for kind of walking through how sadness and depression impact people's lives, and more importantly, the hope that we have for them to get the help.
Well, and I think it's so evident in our community that we are a people of hope, and we are Bayou strong, and so we do wish hope for everybody to see those little pieces of hope out there.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Karen.
Thank you.
All right, that'll do it for this particular self-help segment. Don't go anywhere. A whole lot more Bayou Time when we continue.